Please don't do this to me today, Skylar murmured to the car's dashboard, her hands trembling on the steering wheel as she tried to start it once more. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died again, leaving only the sound of crickets and the wind rustling dry branches by the side of the gravel road. She rested her forehead on the steering wheel and took a deep breath. Her diner uniform was already sticking to her back with nervous sweat, and the digital clock flashed relentlessly. 11:47. Her shift started at noon, and Edna didn't tolerate tardiness. Not when the lunch rush was what kept the place running. Skylar got out of the car and opened the hood, even though she knew she wouldn't understand anything she saw there. The steam rising from the engine confirmed her worst suspicions. She looked both ways down the empty road, searching for a miracle that wasn't appearing. No cell signal, not a single car passing by for an hour. Damn it, she whispered, feeling tears well up. She couldn't lose this job, not when she was so close to saving enough money to get out of this life. That's when she heard footsteps on the dry earth. Trouble? The voice was deep, calm, unhurried. Skylar turned and saw a man walking toward her. Tall, lean, with a white shirt stained with grease and oil-stained hands. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he had just emerged from under a hood. But there was something in his eyes, a tranquility that made her breathe a little easier. "My car decided to die at the worst possible moment," she replied, trying to smile despite the situation. "Do you know anything about mechanics?" He approached without a word, looked at the steaming engine, and nodded slightly. "Overheating," he said simply. "We'll have to wait for it to cool down to see the damage." "I can't wait." Skylar felt desperation return. "I need to get to work now or what?" The question came out so naturally, so non-judgmental, that Skylar found herself answering before she even thought. "Or I'll lose my job. And I can't lose this job." He studied her for a moment, those dark eyes seeming to see more than she was saying. "The diner on the main road?" Skylar nodded, surprised. "How did you—" "I've eaten there a few times. You're the waitress who takes orders from memory and never messes one up." She felt her face flush. He had noticed her? Really noticed her? "Let's push the car there," he said suddenly, taking the keys out of the ignition and tucking them into her pocket. "I know a mechanic about 2 miles from here. I'll take you to work afterward." "Push? 2 miles? It's easier than it sounds. Come on." He was already positioning himself at the back of the car, and Skylar realized she didn't have much choice. She got behind the wheel while he started pushing, and to her surprise, the car began to move more easily than she'd imagined. "What's your name?" she asked when they stopped to rest halfway. "Skylar," she replied, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Skylar," he repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "Pretty name. And yours?" There was an odd pause as if he was deciding what to answer. "You can call me Jax." It wasn't a complete answer, Skylar realized, but she didn't press. There was something about him that intrigued her. The way he spoke little but said a lot. How his hands seemed to know every gear in the world. How his eyes watched her with an interest she couldn't decipher. When they finally arrived at the small garage, Jack spoke in a low voice with the mechanic, while Skylar waited, watching him. There was a familiarity there, a language she didn't understand but that spoke of years of experience with engines and tools. "Gus will take a look," Jax returned to her, "but it'll take a few hours. Come on, I'll take you to work." "You have a car?" "I have a motorcycle back there." Skylar had never ridden a motorcycle in her life, but 15 minutes later she was clinging to a stranger's waist, feeling the wind on her face and a strange sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in a long time. When they arrived at the diner, she dismounted with wobbly legs and completely disheveled hair. "Thank you," she said, straightening her uniform. "Really, I don't know how I'll repay you." Jax watched her for a moment, and Skylar had the impression he was memorizing every detail of her face. "You don't need to repay anything, just—" He hesitated. "Can I have lunch here today?" The question was simple, but the way he asked it sounded much more important. "Of course," Skylar smiled, feeling something stir strangely in her chest. "I'll personally take care of your order." She ran into the diner, managing to clock in just 3 minutes late. Edna grumbled something about punctuality, but Skylar barely heard it. She was too busy thinking about the man with dirty hands who had appeared like a guardian angel in her hour of desperation. And as she tied her apron and prepared for another day of work, a question echoed in her mind. Who truly was this man who had saved her? If you're enjoying this story, I imagine you're curious to know more about this unexpected encounter. Keep following to discover the secrets yet to come in this journey full of surprises. Skylar spent the rest of the morning trying not to look toward the diner door every 5 minutes. The lunch rush had begun, and she busied herself serving the usual truckers, local government employees, and local business owners who came for their takeout orders wrapped in foil. "Skylar, table 3, Edna shouted from the kitchen, her raspy voice cutting through the hum of the room. She picked up the plate of chicken fried steak special and walked to the table, but her eyes kept searching for a familiar figure. Had he changed his mind? Maybe it had just been kindness, one of those promises made in the heat of the moment and then forgotten. That's when the doorbell chimed and she saw him walk in. Jax looked different in the daylight of the diner. He still wore the same grease-stained shirt, but there was something in his posture, in the way he observed the room, that made her feel he didn't quite belong there. Not in the same way the other customers did. "Hi," he said simply when she approached, and Skylar felt a smile escape before she could control it. "Hi. I got you a table in the back, quieter." He nodded and followed her, choosing a chair from which he could observe all the diner's activity. Skylar noticed his eyes weren't just fixed on her, but on every detail of the place. The flickering light in the restroom, the kitchen door that creaked every time someone passed through, the persistently dripping sink faucet. "What can I get you?" she asked, pulling her pad from her apron. "What do you recommend?" "Depends. Are you really hungry or just want a bite?" Jax smiled for the first time since she'd met him, and Skylar felt something warm spread through her chest. "Really hungry." "Then go for the chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes, gravy, and green beans. It's Edna's specialty." "Perfect." Skylar jotted down the order, but when she turned to leave, he called her. "Skylar?" "Yes?" "Your car should be ready by late afternoon. Gus is good at what he does." "Thanks, really." She hesitated for a moment. "How much will the repair cost?" "Not much. Small problem." Something in the way he said it made Skylar suspect it wasn't quite so, but before she could ask anything else, Edna shouted from the kitchen, complaining about the delay. During lunch, Skylar found herself discreetly observing Jax. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, but his eyes continued to study the surroundings. When she passed by his table to serve another customer, she heard a distinct metallic sound and turned to see Jax under the table, fiddling with something. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "The table was wobbly," he replied, sitting back up. "Just adjusted the screw." Skylar blinked, confused. She hadn't even noticed the table was wobbly, but now that he mentioned it, she remembered she always avoided putting full plates there. "You didn't have to. It's no trouble." After lunch, as Skylar cleaned tables, she noticed Jax hadn't left. He was talking in a low voice with Edna near the kitchen, gesturing toward the restroom. The diner owner, usually suspicious of strangers, listened attentively and even nodded a few times. "What were you talking about?" Skylar asked, when he finally approached to pay the bill. "Nothing much. Just commented on the restroom light." "You noticed the restroom light?" "I notice a lot of things." Skylar studied his face, looking for clues about who this man was, who fixed wobbly tables and worried about faulty lights in roadside diners. "How much do I owe?" he asked. $15. Jax pulled a $50 bill from his pocket and left it on the counter. "The change. Keep it for a tip." $35 tip? Skylar stared at him, incredulous. "That's more than I make in half a shift. You deserve it." Before she could protest, he was already heading for the door. "Jax," she called out. He stopped and turned. "Thank you. For everything." "You're welcome, Skylar." The way he said her name made her feel special in a way she couldn't explain. After he left, Skylar stared at the $50 bill. Nobody left tips like that in a roadside diner. Nobody fixed tables for free. Nobody worried about restroom lights in establishments they didn't even frequent. Who was Jax, after all? "Skylar," Edna called from the kitchen. "That young man said he'd be back tomorrow to look at the light." "Good guy, that one." Skylar put the bill in her pocket, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. There was something about Jax that didn't quite fit, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet assemble. But one thing she knew for sure, he would be back tomorrow, and she would be waiting. The afternoon passed slowly, and Skylar found herself counting the hours until she could pick up her car. Not just because she needed it, but because it would mean seeing Jax once more. And perhaps this time, she could discover a little more about the mysterious man who had entered her life by pushing a broken car on a gravel road. Late afternoon arrived with an orange-hued sky that painted the road in golden tones. Skylar put away her apron and said goodbye to Edna, who was still grumbling about the restroom light. "That young man said he'd be back early tomorrow," the woman commented. "Said he knows about electrical work too." Skylar walked to Gus's garage, expecting to find only the elderly mechanic. But Jax was leaning against the wall waiting for her. "How did you know what time I'd get off?" "I asked Edna, and she told you just like that, no questions asked?" "She said you worked hard." Skylar felt her face flush. Edna speaking well of her to a stranger was almost a miracle. "Skylar," the mechanic called out, appearing with dirty hands. "All set. Just the radiator hose, replaced it with a new one." "How much is it?" Skylar asked, bracing for a hit to her budget. $60, young lady. But this gentleman here already settled up with me." Skylar turned to Jax, incredulous. "You paid for my repair?" "It was nothing major." $60 isn't nothing major?" Her voice came out louder. "I'll pay you back." "No need." "Yes, I do. I don't accept charity." There was a tense silence. Gus discreetly moved away. "It's not charity," Jax finally said. "It's a favor between friends." The word friends hung in the air, laden with unexplored meanings. Skylar sighed and took her car keys. "Thanks, but I will pay you back." "As you wish." The car ran perfectly. Skylar turned to Jax. "Need a ride?" "Came on my bike, remember?" "Right, so. See you tomorrow?" "See you tomorrow." She was already pulling away when she heard Jax call her name. She stopped the car and rolled down the window. "Why is it so important for you not to lose this job?" he asked, seeming hesitant for the first time. The question caught her off guard. Skylar remained silent, her hands on the steering wheel. "Because it's my only chance to get out of this life, to get something better. I've been saving money for 2 years to study, maybe open my own business." "What kind of business?" Skylar laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "You'll think it's silly." "I won't." She studied him, looking for signs of mockery. She found none. A small inn, nothing luxurious but cozy. A place where people feel at home with homemade coffee, simple but clean rooms, a porch to watch the sunset. That's not silly. No. No. It's a beautiful dream. Skylar felt something stir in her chest. It had been a long time since anyone had talked about her dreams without looking sorry for her. "My dad was a trucker. He always said what he missed most on the road were places that felt like home. Impersonal hotels, soulless diners." Skylar pulled a small, worn keychain with a tiny metal truck from her pocket. "He gave me this before he died. Said one day I'd find my own road." Jax held out his hand and Skylar placed the keychain in his palm. He held it as if it were made of crystal, running his finger over the faded little truck. "How long ago?" 3 years. "Heart attack on the road." "I'm sorry. That's why I can't lose this job. It's all I have to get where I want to go." Jax remained silent, just watching her with those eyes that seemed to see more than she showed. "Your inn will be special," he finally said. "How can you be sure?" "Because you understand what it means to feel at home." Skylar felt her eyes well up, but she controlled the tears. There was something in Jax's voice that made her feel that maybe she wasn't alone in her dreams. "I need to go," she said, taking the keychain back and carefully putting it away. "But thank you for everything, truly." "You're welcome, Skylar." As she drove home, Skylar couldn't forget the way Jax had held her keychain, as if he understood exactly what it represented. And for the first time in years, she found herself thinking that maybe it wasn't so impossible to find her road. Skylar arrived at the diner the next morning to find Jax already waiting outside, a small toolbox in his hand. Edna opened the door with a rare smile on her face. "Early bird, young man. I like that," she said to Jax, then turned to Skylar. "And you, get some strong coffee ready for someone who's working here for free." As Skylar arranged the tables and prepared the coffee, she could hear sounds coming from the restroom. Jax dismantling the faulty fixture, the metallic clatter of tools, his measured, confident footsteps. "Coffee," she said, appearing at the door with a steaming mug. "Thanks." Jax accepted the drink, and Skylar noticed his hands were clean now, with no trace of yesterday's grease. 15 more minutes and it's done. "Do you do this professionally?" "Do what?" "Fix things, electrical, mechanical." Jax took a sip of coffee and watched her for a moment. "Let's just say I learned out of necessity." Always vague answers, Skylar thought, as if every question about his past met an invisible wall. "Well," she said, "if you need anything, I'll be at the counter." The morning rush started slowly. The first truckers walked in yawning, ordering black coffee and toast. Skylar served mechanically, but her ears were tuned to the sounds coming from the restroom. When Jax finished, the light worked perfectly, without the annoying flicker that had bothered everyone for months. "Done," he announced, putting away his tools. "Just needed to replace the starter." "How much do I owe you?" Edna asked, already pulling money from the drawer. "Nothing. The starter cost $5, but consider it a favor. Young man, you can't keep working for free." It wasn't work. It was pleasure. Skylar watched him from the kitchen, intrigued. There was something in the way he talked about fixing things that seemed sincere, as if he genuinely enjoyed solving problems. "Well then, at least have lunch here today," Edna insisted. "On the house." "I accept." Jax smiled. "If Skylar serves me." Skylar's heart did a little skip, but she pretended to be busy organizing the spices. "Of course," she said, trying to sound casual. "Back table?" "Perfect." The rest of the morning passed in a subtle dance. Jax stayed in the diner, sometimes reading an old newspaper, sometimes watching Skylar work. It wasn't an invasive or uncomfortable gaze. It was attentive, as if he was genuinely interested in her every movement, her every efficient gesture. "You never stop," he commented when she passed his table for the 10th time in an hour. "If I stop, things pile up," Skylar replied, cleaning a nearby table. "And Edna doesn't like to see anyone idle." "But do you like what you do?" The question made her pause. No one had ever asked her that before. "It's honest work," she replied diplomatically. "That's not what I asked." Skylar straightened up and faced him. "I don't know if I like it. I've never stopped to think about it. It's what I have now. It's what gets me where I want to go. And if you could do anything today without worrying about money, what would you do?" "Besides the inn?" "Besides the inn." Skylar thought for a moment, surprised she'd never considered that possibility. "I guess I'd cook. Real food, not fast food. Dishes that reminded people of home, of family, like what your mother used to make." "My mom died when I was 12, she said simply. "But my grandma, she cooked as if she was putting love into every pot." Jax nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "I bet you inherited that from her." "How can you know?" "By the way you take care of people here. Even in the way you serve coffee, there's care." Skylar felt her face flush. It was strange to be seen that way, as if her small gestures had meaning. "You notice a lot of things," she murmured. "Only the things that matter." His eyes met hers, and for a moment Skylar forgot where she was, forgot the diner's hustle, forgot everything except that strange feeling of being truly seen by someone. "Skylar," Edna's voice broke the moment. "Table 6 is waiting." She blinked and returned to reality, but as she moved away to serve the customer, she still felt Jax's gaze on her back. And for the first time in a long time, Skylar found herself thinking that maybe liking the job wasn't the most important question. Maybe the question was having someone who noticed the things that mattered. A week passed, and Jax had become part of the diner's routine. He arrived every morning around 10, always with some discreet tool in his pocket, always finding something small to fix. Skylar started to look forward to those moments. The way he appeared silently, how his eyes sought hers as soon as he walked in. "Morning," he said that Thursday morning. "Morning. Coffee?" "Always." She served it in the blue mug that had become his. Skylar didn't even know when she started setting that mug aside specifically for Jax. "The kitchen door is still creaking," Edna commented. "It's driving me crazy, that sound." "I can take a look," Jax offered. "You don't have to keep fixing everything around here," Skylar said, but without real protest. "I don't have to, but I want to." "Why?" The question escaped before she could control herself. Jax looked at her. Because I like to see things working right. And because I like being here. Skylar's heart beat faster. I'll get the machine oil from the storeroom, she murmured, leaving quickly. The storeroom was in the back, a cramped room where Edna kept cleaning supplies. Skylar was looking for the oil when she heard footsteps behind her. Need help? Jax's voice made her turn around. He stood in the doorway, taller than he seemed in the cramped space. It's in here somewhere, she said, searching the shelves. Edna swears she left it. Here. She stretched to reach a can on the high shelf but couldn't. Jax approached from behind, his arm reaching over hers to grab the oil. For a moment, Skylar stood still, feeling the warmth of his body, the clean scent of soap. When he placed the can in her hands, their fingers briefly touched. Skylar, he said softly. She turned slowly, and suddenly, they were very close. Skylar could see the small details of his eyes, how his lips curved slightly. Jax, Skylar, where's that oil? Edna's voice cut through the moment. They quickly separated, Skylar clutching the can tightly, Jax running a hand through his hair nervously. It's here, Edna, Skylar shouted. When they came out, the lunch rush was beginning. Skylar took refuge in the commotion, grateful for the distraction. Jax worked on the door in silence, applying oil to the hinges until the creak disappeared. Skylar watched him discreetly, noting how his hands worked with precision. Done, he announced, testing the door that now moved silently. Won't bother you anymore. Thanks, Edna said. That noise was making me deaf. Sometimes the little annoyances are the worst. Jax smiled. Skylar caught his gaze and felt he wasn't just talking about the door. The rest of the day passed in strange tension. They behaved normally on the surface, but there was something different in the air, a mutual awareness that hadn't existed before. When it was time for Jax to leave, Skylar felt disappointed. Tomorrow's Friday, he said, stopping at the counter. It is, she agreed. Do you guys close earlier on Fridays? At 6 instead of 8. And you have any plans afterward? The question caught her off guard. No. Why? I thought maybe you'd want to see a place I discovered. It's beautiful. Quiet. Skylar's heart started beating faster. What kind of place? A surprise, if you trust me. She studied him, looking for any sign that she shouldn't trust him. She found none. There was something in his eyes that made her feel she could trust him with much more than just an afternoon. Okay, she finally said, but nothing too far, and I want to be back before dark. The smile that formed on Jax's face was different from all the others, wider, more genuine. Promise I'll pick you up at 6:30? Sounds good. After he left, Skylar stared at the silent kitchen door, thinking about how Jax had fixed more than just the creak. He had fixed something in her too, something she didn't even know was broken. Skylar changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blouse and a skirt she hadn't worn in months. It wasn't a date, she kept telling herself. It was just a ride. At 6:30, Jax appeared on his motorcycle. This time he wore a clean shirt and his hair was combed, as if he too had dressed up. Ready? He asked, offering a helmet. Skylar got on the back and put her arms around his waist, feeling the same acceleration in her chest. They left town on the main road, but then Jax took a trail Skylar had never noticed. The landscape changed. Open fields gave way to dense trees. The sound of the city faded. They stopped in a clearing where a wooden bridge crossed a stream. On the other side, an abandoned building covered in vines. What is this place? Skylar asked. It was a small farm. Abandoned about 10 years ago. Jax put away his keys. Come, I want to show you something. They walked slowly across the bridge, he testing each plank. On the other side, they followed a trail to an elevation behind the house. Skylar held her breath. The view was spectacular. Miles of landscape, rolling fields, small farms, and in the distance, the city lights coming on at dusk. The silence was complete, broken only by the sound of the stream. It's beautiful, she whispered. I thought you'd like it. Jax sat on the grass. It's the kind of place where a person can think. Skylar sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. How did you discover this place? By chance. I was looking for somewhere to be alone, to think about some things. What kind of things? Who I am, who I want to be. And did you come to any conclusion? Not yet, but being here, being with you, it's helping me see some things clearer. Skylar's heart accelerated. Jax, can I ask you a question? You can. Who are you really? He looked at her and Skylar saw something that looked like pain passing through his eyes. Why do you ask that? Because you don't seem to completely belong in the world where we met. The way you talk, the way you move, it's like you're from somewhere different. Jax looked away, fixing his eyes on the distant city. Maybe I am. From somewhere different. And where is this place? A place I don't want to be anymore. Skylar moved closer, lightly touching his arm. Are you running from something? Not running. Searching. Searching for what? Something real. Someone who sees me for who I really am, not for what people expect. His eyes sought hers. And did you find it? She asked in a whisper. I think so. They looked at each other, the air thick with possibilities. Skylar felt she was on the verge of something important. Skylar, Jack said softly, there's something I need to tell you. What? Just then, the sound of an engine echoed through the valley. Headlights approached on the road, breaking the magic. It's getting dark, Jack said, losing his nerve. Better head back. But you were going to tell me. Another time. I promise. During the ride back, Skylar felt that something important had slipped away. Jax had been about to open up and the opportunity had passed. When they arrived at the diner, she got off feeling incomplete. Thank you. It was special. For me too. See you Monday? Of course. Good night, Skylar. She watched him leave, the motorcycle's light disappearing into the darkness. As she went up to her apartment, Skylar wondered what secret Jax carried that was so hard to tell. The weekend passed slowly for Skylar. Saturday and Sunday seemed endless, each minute dragged by curiosity about what Jax had almost told her. She found herself replaying every word, every look, trying to decipher the mystery he carried. Monday finally arrived, but with it came an unexpected surprise. Skylar was preparing the morning coffee when she saw a sleek black car park in front of the diner. It wasn't uncommon for cars to pass by there, but this one was different. Polished, expensive, completely out of place on that stretch of road. A man in a suit got out of the vehicle and entered the diner, his eyes hidden behind expensive dark sunglasses. He looked around with an expression Skylar couldn't decipher. Neither disdain nor approval, just analysis. Good morning, Skylar said, approaching. Can I get you a table? Actually, I'm looking for someone. A man, tall, dark hair, rides a motorcycle around here. Skylar's heart pounded. Was he looking for Jax? Can you be more specific? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Jackson Sterling. Does he frequent this establishment? Skylar hesitated. There was something in the man's tone that made her uncomfortable. I don't know anyone by that name, she lied. The man studied her for a moment, then pulled a business card from his pocket. If he shows up, could you give this to him? It's important. Skylar took the card. It was heavy with embossed gold letters. Miles Sterling, Executive Director, Sterling Auto Group. Of course, she said, putting the card in her apron. Thank you. And he hesitated at the door. Did he mention anything about family matters? I said I don't know him. The man nodded and left, leaving Skylar with more questions than answers. Jackson Sterling. So that was his full name. And someone from what seemed to be an important company was after him. Why? Jax arrived at his usual time, but Skylar noticed he looked different. More tense, looking around as if he was expecting something, or someone. Everything okay? She asked as she served his coffee. Why do you ask? You seem preoccupied. Jax watched her for a moment. Did anyone show up here today, asking for me? Skylar's heart pounded. How did he know? They did, she said, pulling the card from her apron. Left this. Jax turned pale when he saw the card. His hands trembled slightly as he took it. Miles, he murmured, as if talking to himself. Who is he? Someone I hoped never to see again. Jax, what's going on? He looked at her and Skylar saw genuine fear in his eyes. Skylar, I need to tell you the truth about who I am. Then tell me. Not here. Too many people, too much noise. After work? Yes, but he hesitated. After I tell you, you might not want to see me anymore. The sentence hit her like a punch. Why do you think that? Because I'm not who you think I am. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety. Skylar could barely concentrate on work, serving orders mechanically as her mind raced in circles. What secret did Jax carry that could be so terrible? Edna noticed her distraction. Girl, your head's in the clouds today. Did something happen? Something like that. Does it have to do with that young man who's always around? Skylar turned surprised. What do you mean? I'm not blind, Skylar. You two look at each other like two smitten teenagers. And today he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He's just going through some stuff. What kind of stuff? I don't know yet. Edna studied her with her experienced eyes. I'll just give you one piece of advice, girl. A man with a secret is like a pressure cooker. It's bound to blow eventually. Are you sure you want to be around when that happens? The question echoed in Skylar's mind for the rest of the day. Was she sure? She had known Jax for just over 2 weeks. What did she really know about him besides the fact that he fixed things and made her feel special? When the clock struck 6, Skylar felt her stomach churn with nerves. In a few hours, she would find out who Jackson Sterling really was. And a part of her began to fear that Edna was right about pressure cookers that explode. Jax was waiting, leaning against his motorcycle, when Skylar left the diner. The gold card was crumpled in his hand, as if he had squeezed it multiple times throughout the day. Should we go to our spot? She asked, trying to break the tension. Yes, but this time we'll take your car. You drive. The change of plans made her even more nervous. Jax always insisted on riding his bike, had never accepted rides before. During the drive, the silence was heavy. Skylar glanced at him in the passenger seat, seeing how his hands trembled slightly, how he looked out the window, as if seeing everything for the last time. They arrived at their special spot as the sun began to set. This time, Jax didn't go straight to the elevated viewpoint. He stopped near the abandoned house and sat on the steps of the dilapidated porch. Jackson Sterling, Skylar said, sitting beside him. That's your real name. It is, but that's not all. He took a deep breath. Skylar, my full name is Jackson Sterling Mendes. The last name hit her like lightning. Sterling, like the man on the card. Miles Sterling is my uncle, my family's partner in the company. What company? Jax closed his eyes for a moment, as if the next words were painful. Sterling Auto Group, the largest network of dealerships in the state. My father founded it with my uncle 30 years ago. Skylar felt the world spin slightly. Dealerships, networks, corporate groups. Was this the world Jax belonged to? And you? I was supposed to be the successor. Since childhood, that's what they taught me. Management, business, how to expand the company. His voice was tinged with bitterness. They never asked me what I wanted. What did you want? To work with my hands. To fix real things, not just sign papers and have meetings about profits. My grandfather was a mechanic. My father also started that way, in my grandfather's garage. But as the company grew, Jack stopped, running his hands through his hair. He forgot where he came from, and he wanted me to forget too. Is that why you're here, running from the company? Not running, searching for who I really am. He looked at her. 3 months ago, I had a terrible argument with my father. He wanted me to take over as president, said it was time for me to grow up and stop playing mechanic. Skylar began to understand. The calloused hands, the knowledge of engines, the way he fixed everything around them. You rebelled. I left home, took some savings, and decided to really live for a while. I worked in small garages, learned from roadside mechanics. For the first time in my life, I felt truly useful. And that's how you found me. On the road. That's how you found me. He smiled sadly. And for the first time in years, I felt normal. Like I was just Jax, not the heir to the Sterling fortune. Skylar slowly processed the information. The man she was falling for was a millionaire. He belonged to a world completely different from hers. Skylar, Jax said softly, everything that happened between us was real. Every moment, every conversation. You knew me for who I really am, not for the money or the name. But you lied to me. I omitted, because I was afraid you'd see me differently. And how do you think I see you now? The question came out colder than she intended. Jax flinched as if slapped. As a liar. As someone who toyed with your feelings. Skylar stood up and walked to the edge of the overlook, looking at the city that was beginning to light up. Her chest was tight, a mixture of betrayal, confusion, and something she didn't want to acknowledge as hurt. "Do you know what the worst part is?" she said without turning around. "What?" "I was falling for you, for the humble mechanic who fixed lights and worried about creaky doors, and now I'm still the same person." "Are you?" Skylar turned, her eyes watering. "You're the heir to a fortune, Jax. Your world is gala events and business meetings. Mine is a roadside diner. It's not about different world. It's not. Then explain what you're doing here with me when you could be anywhere in the world." The question hung between them. Jax stood up and approached her, but Skylar took a step back. "Skylar, please. I need to think. I need to process all of this. I can take you back." "No, I prefer to go alone." She started walking toward the car but turned one last time. Jackson, whatever your name is, thank you for telling me the truth, even if it's late." As she drove back to the city, Skylar couldn't stop the tears that finally came. It wasn't just the revelation about his identity that hurt. It was knowing that, regardless of who he was, they belonged to worlds that could never truly meet. Skylar didn't sleep that night. She stayed at the window of her small apartment, looking at the stars and replaying every moment she had spent with Jax. Every smile, every glance, every kind word. Everything felt different now, tinged by the discovery of who he really was. Had it all been a game for him? A way to amuse himself while escaping his responsibilities? The next morning, she arrived at the diner with dark circles under her eyes and a heavy heart. Edna watched her with concern. "Girl, you look like you were up all night." "Pretty much. Does it have to do with that young man?" Skylar nodded, not trusting her own voice. "He's not who I thought he was." "Ah," Edna sighed. "Men rarely are, honey. The question is, who he really is. Does that make you like him less?" The question caught Skylar off guard. She didn't know the answer. The hours passed slowly. Skylar served customers mechanically, but her eyes searched for the familiar motorcycle that didn't appear. Noon came and went. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Jax didn't come. "He's not coming today," Edna said, walking past what had become his table. "His table's been empty for 2 days." "It's not his table," Skylar replied more sharply than she intended. "Of course not," Edna smiled sadly. "That's why you look at the door every 5 minutes." By Wednesday, Skylar started to genuinely worry. What if something had happened to him? What if his uncle had forced Jax to go back? What if he had simply decided it wasn't worth continuing to pretend to be someone he wasn't? It was on Thursday that she saw the motorcycle parked in front of the diner. Her heart pounded, but when she looked through the window, it wasn't Jax on the bike. It was a younger man, wearing a helmet, who entered the diner looking around. "Excuse me," he said to Skylar. "I'm looking for Jackson Sterling. Someone told me he frequents here." "He's not here," Skylar replied, feeling her chest tighten. "Do you know where I can find him?" "No." The man hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Could you give this to him when he shows up?" "It's from his father." Skylar took the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, official, with the company's letterhead stamped on the corner. Of course. After he left, Skylar stared at the envelope, the letter that would likely call Jax back to his real life, to the world where he truly belonged. She put the envelope in the counter drawer and tried to keep working, but the anxiety was almost unbearable. It was only late in the afternoon that Jax finally appeared. He looked different, thinner, as if he hadn't been eating properly. His eyes had lost that sparkle she had learned to recognize, and there was something defeated in his posture. "Hi," he said softly, stopping at the counter. "Hi." They looked at each other for a moment that seemed eternal. "They brought this for you," Skylar said, handing him the envelope. Jax took it and recognized it immediately. His shoulders slumped even more. "My father. I guess they want you back." "Probably." He tucked the envelope into his pocket without opening it. "Skylar, I need to ask you something." "What?" "Will you give me a chance to explain better? To show you that I didn't lie about what matters?" "Jackson." You can call me Jackson if that helps you understand that I'm no longer pretending to be someone else. Skylar felt tears welling in her eyes. I don't know if that changes anything. It does. At least for me it does. Why? Because for the first time in my life, someone fell in love with me, not with my money or my last name. And I can't lose that without a fight. His words hit Skylar like a punch to the gut. You can't be sure that I was falling in love? You said so on Friday. I was falling for you. Skylar looked away, unable to deny it. And I for you, Jax continued. More than I ever thought possible. That's not a lie, Skylar. That's the only truth that matters. But we're from different worlds. Then let's build a world of our own. The simplicity of the statement left her speechless. It's more complicated than that, Jax. It's Jackson, he said softly. And no, it's not more complicated. It's just harder. Skylar watched him, seeing the sincere vulnerability in his eyes that he wasn't trying to hide. I need time, she finally said, to think about all this. How much time? I don't know. Jackson nodded, disappointed but not surprised. All right. But Skylar, when you decide, remember that the man who fixed your light, who held your keychain as if it were sacred, who took you to watch the sunset, that man is me. Rich or poor, Jax or Jackson. It's me. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. And whatever your decision, thank you for showing me who I can be when I'm true to myself. After he left, Skylar stood behind the counter, her heart broken and her mind in chaos. Because the worst part was knowing that despite everything, she was still falling for him. A week passed without Skylar seeing Jackson. The diner seemed smaller without his presence, and she found herself looking at the back table with an ache in her chest. It was on a Thursday that Edna received an unexpected call. Skylar, she yelled from the kitchen. Come here, it's for you. Skylar answered the phone with curiosity. Hello? Skylar Santos? A professional female voice. Yes. My name is Carla, from Events & Co. We have a corporate gala tomorrow night and need extra help for the catering. Someone recommended your name. Who recommended me? I can't disclose that, but we're paying $200 for the night. Interested? $200 was almost a week's pay at the diner. Skylar couldn't refuse. Yes, I'm interested. What kind of event? Corporate gala. Black formal attire, we start at 7. Can I send you the address? On Friday, Skylar dressed in the best she had, a simple black blouse and a skirt she'd bought for her father's funeral. It wasn't elegant, but it would be sufficient. The event was at the city's finest hotel. Skylar had never been there, and she felt small walking through the marble hallways, observing the crystal chandeliers and artworks on the walls. The coordinator greeted her with a waitress uniform and quick instructions on how to serve the guests. Remember, be discreet and polite. These are important business people. The main ballroom was decorated with expensive flowers and soft lighting. Men in tuxedos and women in stunning gowns conversed in small groups, champagne glasses in hand. Skylar circulated with her tray, offering canapes and trying to remain invisible. It was a world completely different from hers. People talking about multi-million-dollar deals, international travel, investments. It was when she heard his name called over the microphone that her blood ran cold. And now, please welcome Jackson Sterling, CEO of our newest partner, Sterling Auto Group, to speak about our expansion plans. Skylar slowly turned toward the stage and saw him. Jackson was at the podium, impeccable in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His hair was combed back and he wore an expensive tie that probably cost more than her monthly salary. But it was his eyes that shocked her. Cold, professional, completely different from the man she had known. Good evening, Jackson said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the ballroom. It's a pleasure to be here representing the Sterling Group. Skylar couldn't hear the rest. Her legs trembled and she had to lean against the wall. This was his real world. This was who Jackson Sterling truly was. She tried to leave discreetly but bumped into a man in an expensive suit. Excuse me, she murmured. Hold on. The man studied her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're her, aren't you? How? The waitress. Skylar felt her face flush. How did he know? He has good taste, I'll admit, the man continued. But you know this isn't serious, right? Skylar froze. Guys like him have their fun with people like you. But then he goes back to where he really belongs. The words hit Skylar like slaps. She looked at the stage, where Jackson continued his professional speech, and then at the man beside her. "Excuse me," she said firmly, turning her back. But as she walked toward the exit, the words echoed in her mind. "Guys like him have their fun with people like you." She returned the uniform to the coordinator, invented an excuse about not feeling well, and left the hotel without looking back. On the street, she breathed the cold night air and felt the tears finally come. They weren't tears of anger, but of painful understanding. That man on the stage talking about expansions and profits was the real Jackson. The man who fixed lights and held her keychain with care had just been a temporary fantasy, and she had been foolish to believe it could be different. As she walked home, Skylar made a decision. It didn't matter what Jackson said when he returned to the diner. It didn't matter how many explanations he offered. Some worlds simply weren't meant to meet. Skylar didn't go to work on Saturday. For the first time in 2 years, she called Edna, claiming to be sick. It wasn't a lie. Her heart was sick. She spent the weekend in her apartment, alternating between anger and sadness. The words of the man at the event echoed constantly. "Guys like him have their fun with people like you." On Monday, she returned to work determined to move forward. She arrived early, brewed coffee stronger than usual, and focused on her routine tasks. Jackson didn't appear. Tuesday passed uneventfully as well. Skylar began to relax, thinking that maybe he had gotten the message and returned to his real life. It was on Wednesday that her life turned upside down. Skylar was cleaning tables when a man in a suit entered the diner. She recognized him immediately. It was the same one who had brought the card days ago. "Edna?" he asked. "That's me," the owner replied, coming out of the kitchen. "What can I do for you?" "I'm from the city planning department. I'm here to officially inform you that this establishment will be acquired by eminent domain." Skylar's blood ran cold. "Acquired by eminent domain?" Edna asked, her hands trembling. "The area has been acquired for a commercial development project. You have 30 days to vacate." But I pay all my taxes, I have all my permits in order." "This isn't a matter of irregularities, ma'am. It's urban development. Compensation will be based on municipal assessment." The man handed over an official envelope and left, leaving Edna and Skylar in shock. 30 days, Edna murmured, looking at the paper. 30 days to close what I've built my whole life. Skylar felt nauseous. She took the envelope from Edna's hand and quickly read it. At the end of the document, a piece of information made her world crumble. Project authorized for dealership installation, Sterling Auto Group. Skylar's legs gave out. She sat heavily in a chair. "Skylar? What's wrong?" Edna asked, concerned. "Look here." Skylar pointed to the line. "Who will occupy the space?" Edna read it and turned pale. "Sterling Group. But isn't that the last name of that young man who—" "It is," Skylar said, her voice breaking. "It's him." The realization hit them both simultaneously. Jackson knew. He had always known the diner would be closed. He had approached Skylar knowing he would destroy her life. "That scoundrel," Edna murmured, "played you, knowing he'd kick us out." Skylar couldn't speak. The pain in her chest was physical, as if something was being ripped from within her. Everything made sense now. The questions about her dreams, the interest in the diner, the constant repairs. He was evaluating the location, studying the obstacle that needed to be removed. And she had just been a diversion during the process. "Skylar, honey, you're pale," Edna approached. "I need to step out for a bit," Skylar managed to say. "I need to think." She stumbled out of the diner with no definite direction. She walked through the streets of the small town, past familiar landmarks that would soon be gone from her routine. She stopped in front of the park bench where she sometimes ate her lunch when she was in a hurry. She sat down and pulled her father's keychain from her pocket. "Dad," she whispered, holding the small metal truck. "I don't know where my road is anymore." The tears came then all at once. Tears for the diner she would lose, for the job that sustained her dreams, for the betrayal of someone she had trusted her heart to. But mostly, tears for having been so naive to believe that someone like Jackson Sterling could truly be interested in someone like her. When the tears dried, Skylar stood up with a cold determination in her chest. 30 days. She had 30 days to find a new job, a new place to work, a new plan for her life. And this time she would do it all alone, without trusting kind-eyed, calloused-handed strangers who fixed broken things. Because she had discovered in the worst way possible that some people don't fix anything. They just break what was still working. Jackson was in his downtown office, looking out the panoramic window that showcased the entire region where he had grown up. For the past 2 weeks, ever since the corporate event, he couldn't get Skylar out of his head. He had seen her that night. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the crowded ballroom before she disappeared. Since then, he hadn't slept properly. "Jackson," his father entered the office without knocking. "We need to talk." Arthur Sterling Sr. was an imposing man, accustomed to getting everything he wanted. At 60, he still commanded the company with an iron fist. "About what?" "About this rebellious streak of yours. It's lasted long enough." Jackson turned from the window to face his father. "It's not a streak." "Of course it is. You played mechanic, had your adventures, and now it's time to take on your real responsibilities. What if I don't want to?" "It's not a matter of wanting." His father sat in the leather armchair. "It's a matter of duty. This company is your legacy. A legacy I didn't ask for. Nobody asks for legacies, Jackson. They simply inherit them, and you will honor what I've built." Jackson took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of paternal pressure. "Father, I need to tell you something. I met someone, a woman." "Ah," his father smirked with disdain. "The diner waitress." Jackson's blood ran cold. "How do you know? Do you think I don't have eyes in this city? I know every step you've taken in the past few months. Then you know that I know you had a little fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. Every man needs to have some fun before taking on serious responsibilities." "It wasn't fun, Father. I love her." The word slipped out before Jackson could control himself. It was the first time he had admitted it, even to himself. His father laughed loudly. "Love? Jackson, you're 28. It's high time you distinguished love from a whim." "It's not a whim." "Then what is it? You're going to abandon all this?" He gestured to the luxurious office. "For a waitress with no future?" "She has more future than anyone I know. She has dreams, determination. She has poverty, Jackson. And poverty isn't romantic in real life." Jackson clenched his fists. "You don't know her." "I don't need to know her, I know the type." His father stood up. "But this ends now. The diner will be demolished next week and the waitress will have to find another job, preferably far from here." "What?" "The eminent domain acquisition was approved yesterday. We're building our new unit exactly where that rundown establishment sits." Jackson felt the world spin. "You did this on purpose." "I did what was necessary to bring my son back to reality." "You destroyed her life to control me?" "I protected our family interests," his father said coldly. "As I always have." Jackson remained silent for a long moment, processing the calculated cruelty of the situation. "Father," he finally said, "you just made the easiest decision of my life." "What do you mean?" "You just showed me exactly the kind of man I don't want to be." Jackson walked to the desk, picked up the office keys and threw them onto the glass top. "I'm out." "Jackson, you can't just—" "I can, and I am. If you walk out that door, you'll have nothing left. No money, no name, no future." Jackson stopped at the door and turned. "Father, for the first time in my life, I'm going to have everything. I'm going to have my dignity." He walked out of the office and down to the parking lot, knowing exactly what he needed to do. He had a diner to save, and a woman to win back. But first, he had to find a way to undo the damage his family had caused. And he knew it wouldn't be easy. Skylar probably wouldn't even want to look at him, and he couldn't blame her. But he had to try. Because he had finally understood what was more important than money or power, having someone who loved him for who he truly was. And he was willing to fight for that. 3 weeks passed since Skylar received the job offer in Atlanta, an opportunity with a restaurant chain with better pay and a chance for growth. Everything she had always wanted. But something was holding her back from accepting. Maybe it was the way Edna tried to hide her tears as she organized the last belongings in the diner. Or maybe it was the fact that running away felt like cowardice. "You should go, girl," Edna said, wrapping the last dishes. "There's nothing left for you here." Skylar looked around the empty diner. The tables had been sold, the equipment removed. Only memories remained. And you, ma'am? What will you do? I'm going to live with my sister in Omaha. It's time for me to retire anyway. Skylar nodded, feeling a pang in her chest. It was the end of an era. That's when she heard noise outside. Voices, movement, the sound of trucks. Are they starting the demolition already? Edna asked, worried. Skylar went to the window and gasped. They weren't demolition machines, they were construction material trucks. And in the middle of everything, coordinating the workers, was Jackson. But not the tuxedo-clad Jackson she'd seen at the event. It was the Jack she'd known. Stained shirt, hands-on, directing the operation as if he were an experienced construction foreman. What is he doing here? Edna murmured, approaching the window. Skylar walked out of the diner, slowly making her way to where Jackson was. He saw her approaching and stopped talking to the workers. Skylar, he said, taking off his helmet. What is all this? I'm rebuilding. Rebuilding what? The diner. In a better, bigger place. With everything you and Edna need. Skylar blinked, confused. I don't understand. Jackson took a deep breath. I sold my share in the company. I bought this land next door, got all the permits. I'm building a new diner. Why? Because I destroyed something that shouldn't have been destroyed and I need to fix it. Jackson, I can't accept this. It's charity. It's not charity. He interrupted her. It's a business. I want you to be my partner. Skylar fell silent, processing the words. Partner? 50% for you, 50 for me. You manage. I handle the technical side. We do this together. And why would I do that? Jackson looked at her with the eyes she had learned to love. Because you understand real hospitality. Because you know how to make people feel at home. Because you have a gift for caring for others. Jackson. And because, he hesitated, because I hope that one day you can forgive me and give us a chance. Skylar felt tears welling in her eyes. You gave up everything. I gave up things that didn't make me happy to try and win the only thing that matters. What if I say no? Then you say no. But the diner will exist anyway. Edna will have a place to work if she wants, and you'll know you'll always have a place here if you change your mind. Skylar looked at the land, at the workers, at the construction materials. When will it be ready? 2 months if all goes well. And in the meantime? Jackson pointed to a prefabricated building in the corner of the lot. Temporary diner, smaller, simpler, but functional. Edna can be back to work next week if she wants. Skylar turned to the older woman who had approached and heard the entire conversation. So, Edna, what do you think? The woman looked at Jackson with suspicion, then at Skylar, and finally smiled. I think that young man learned an important lesson. What lesson? That some things in life are priceless, but they have value. Skylar took a deep breath and looked at Jackson again. Okay, she finally said. Let's try. The smile that formed on his face was like the sunrise. Seriously? Seriously, but with one condition. Anything. Skylar took her father's keychain from her pocket and handed it to Jackson. This stays on the counter of the new diner. To remember that some dreams are worth rebuilding. Jackson took the keychain as if it were the most precious object in the world. I promise, he said softly. And Skylar? Yes? Thank you for giving me a second chance. You haven't earned it yet, she said, but she was smiling. You'll have to work for it. I'll work for the rest of my life if I have to. And as they watched the workers lay the foundations of the new diner, Skylar felt for the first time in weeks that maybe her road hadn't come to an end. Maybe it was just a curve, leading her to a place better than she had ever imagined. 6 months later, Skylar stood behind the counter of the new diner, watching the morning rush with a smile on her face. The place had become more than she had dreamed of. Not just a restaurant, but a true community hub. Her father's keychain hung discreetly beside the cash register, exactly where she had promised it would be. Table 3 is waiting, Jackson said, appearing from the kitchen with a plate in his hand. In recent months, they had developed a perfect partnership. He handled maintenance, suppliers, and the kitchen when needed. She managed customer service, accounts, and the administrative side. And slowly, very slowly, they had rebuilt the trust between them. Skylar called Chloe, one of the young women they had hired as an apprentice. How do I make change for this bill? Skylar approached to help. The training program had been Jackson's idea. offering opportunities for young people in the community to learn professional skills. 3 people had already found better jobs after working there. Like this, see? Schuyler showed the calculation. Always double-check. Thanks, Mrs. Schuyler. Schuyler smiled. Gradually, she was discovering that she liked teaching almost as much as serving. How's the second-floor renovation coming along? She asked Jackson when he returned to the counter. Almost done. 2 more weeks and you'll have your guest rooms. The expansion had been her dream, to transform part of the building into a small, cozy inn, exactly as she had always wanted. Jackson had supported the idea from day one. And you? Schuyler asked. Do you regret anything? It was a question she occasionally asked, still unsure about the choices he had made. Giving up money to have a real life? Jackson smiled. Never. Even when your father shows up here trying to convince you to come back? Especially when he shows up. Arthur Sterling Sr. came to the diner once a month, always trying to persuade Jackson to return to the company. He always left frustrated. Schuyler, Jackson said more seriously, can I ask you something? Of course. When are you going to stop treating me like a business partner and start treating me like... He hesitated. Like someone who loves you? Schuyler's heart pounded. They had avoided talking about feelings in recent months, focusing on rebuilding trust. Jackson, I know I need to prove that I've changed. I know you're still afraid to trust me. But Schuyler, I love you. And not as the Sterling heir, or as your partner. I love you as the man you helped me discover I could be. Schuyler looked at him, seeing the sincere vulnerability in his eyes. I love you too, she finally said. But I'm still scared. Of what? That one day you'll wake up and realize you gave up too much for too little. Jackson walked around the counter and approached her, taking her hands. Schuyler, do you want to know what I gained? He pointed to the busy dining room. I gained a job that gives me purpose. I gained real friends. I gained people's respect because I earned it, not because I have money. He pointed to the keychain. And I gained someone who loves me for who I really am. That's not too little, Schuyler. It's everything. Tears formed in her eyes. Then yes, she whispered. Yes, what? Yes, I'll stop treating you only as a partner. She smiled through her tears. And yes, I accept that you love me. And yes, I love you too. Jackson kissed her right there, in the middle of the bustling diner, to the applause of customers and employees. When they parted, Schuyler looked around, at the smiling people, at the thriving diner, at the keychain that now represented not a lost dream, but a dream realized in a different way. You know what my dad used to say about finding our road? She said to Jackson. What? That sometimes we think we're lost, but we were really just taking the longer route to get to the right place. Jackson smiled and pointed to a sign on the wall he had commissioned. Heart's Haven Diner, where everyone feels at home. So we made it to the right place? Schuyler looked around once more, at the prosperous business, at the people who had become family, at the man who had given up everything to rebuild what he had destroyed. We made it, she said, taking his hand. We finally made it home. And the keychain on the counter shone softly under the morning light, a silent witness that some dreams, when broken, can be rebuilt into something even more beautiful. If you enjoyed this story of new beginnings and second chances, remember that we all have our unique paths to finding where we truly belong. Sometimes what seems like the end is just the beginning of something much better.